What happens when the most commanding figure on Earth pleads desperately to kill the broadcast? That's precisely what America witnessed when Jasmine Crockett methodically cornered President Trump with classified files revealing a truth he'd fought to keep buried forever. The oversight chamber was never meant for this kind of theater, not at this ungodly hour. Past 10 p.m. in Washington, most Americans had already surrendered to their evening routines, half dozing on sofas while television droned in the background. Then, in a heartbeat that would fracture the nation's composure, Representative Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone, her voice steady but sharp as surgical steel. "Mr. President, can you explain why classified documents reveal a DNA connection between you and a woman the American public has never encountered?" The chamber crystallized into absolute stillness. Oxygen seemed to evaporate from the room. Heads snapped around, reporters' pens froze mid-sentence, and camera operators instinctively tightened their focus. Trump's expression transformed in real time, disbelief melting into rage, then something approaching genuine terror. He pressed toward his microphone, his palm flattening against the desk as if anchoring himself to reality. "That's complete fabrication, absolute nonsense," he snapped, his voice cutting through the silence. "This is preposterous. End this. Cut it immediately." But Crockett never raised her voice, never even blinked. She simply maintained that unwavering stare, as if waiting for him to either deny it cleanly or stumble into confirmation. The cameras, naturally, captured everything. Across the nation, drowsy Americans jolted upright, phones erupted with notifications, news anchors scrambled in darkened studios, cutting in with urgent announcements. "We're returning live to the oversight hearing. Something extraordinary is unfolding." And Jasmine Crockett, a freshman congresswoman from Texas who'd earned her reputation through razor-sharp interrogation and absolute fearlessness, suddenly commanded the entire nation's undivided attention. The chamber's silence had evolved into something more charged. Whispers rustling like autumn leaves, papers shuffling nervously, anxious glances ricocheting between lawmakers. Even Capitol security guards adjusted their stance, sensing something far more consequential than routine politics unfolding before them. Crockett cleared her throat, her tone measured and deliberate. "These documents, Mr. President, aren't tabloid gossip or wild speculation. They originate from sealed federal archives. I need to know, and the American people deserve to know, has this intelligence ever been disclosed to national security officials?" The precision of her question mattered. She didn't scream or grandstand. She placed the inquiry on the table, like an undeniable fact, and that restraint alone amplified its power. Trump's response came swift and sharp. "We're not entertaining this nonsense. We will not sit here discussing personal garbage. Someone kill those cameras, shut them down, immediately." But his voice cracked, barely perceptibly, and millions of viewers caught that hairline fracture. The chairman hammered his gavel frantically, but the moment had already spiraled beyond anyone's control. Reporters in the back rows stood, phones raised high, live tweeting every second. Staffers whispered urgently, passing notes that traveled from aide to ranking members. Crockett remained motionless. That stare, steady, unbroken, almost glacial, communicated volumes. You can shout, you can threaten, but you cannot erase what's already exposed. Meanwhile, outside the Capitol's marble walls, establishments across America shared a singular experience. Sports bars in Pittsburgh, coffee houses in Dallas, living rooms in Phoenix, all fixated on screens displaying Trump looking genuinely rattled, his face flushed, his fingers stabbing at the air while pleading to end the broadcast. Right there, in that precise moment, the clip that would define the evening was born. 47 seconds of raw, unfiltered panic from a president who'd built his entire brand on control, strength, and dominance. Now, before the entire country, that image shattered. Crockett leaned back slightly, speaking in low tones that somehow carried through every microphone in the room. "No one here operates above accountability, Mr. President. Not even you." The audience didn't just hear those words. They felt them penetrate. A line that sharp doesn't merely hang in the air. It burrows into consciousness. Some Americans cheered, others gasped. Many simply stared at their screens, struggling to process what they'd witnessed. But for Jasmine Crockett, this moment was entirely calculated. She knew exactly what she'd accomplished, forcing the most powerful man alive to display fear on live television. And once people witness fear, it becomes impossible to unsee. The silence that followed wasn't the story's conclusion. It was merely the opening chapter. The oversight chamber had witnessed heated confrontations before, but this felt fundamentally different. The instant Crockett's words reverberated through the speakers, the atmosphere thickened, as if everyone present suddenly realized they were participating in history. People weren't simply listening anymore. They were holding their collective breath. On the Democratic side, lawmakers leaned forward with widened eyes, whispering urgently into each other's ears. On the Republican side, aides rushed behind their members, slipping notes into waiting hands. Everyone's attention, however, remained laser-focused on one man, Donald Trump. He sat rigid, arms braced against the desk, his expression fighting to maintain composure while his lips pressed into a tight line, and his jaw worked as if grinding stone. The president, who'd always thrived on unpredictability, had become starkly predictable. He was unraveling. "Stop these games," Trump spat, gripping his microphone so forcefully the stand trembled. "This is beneath this committee's dignity. I am the President of the United States, and I refuse to sit here while lies are hurled at me." His voice carried across the chamber with force, but it rang uneven, pitched slightly too high to convey genuine confidence. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She settled into her chair, waiting. That stillness was her weapon. By remaining silent, she forced every camera and eye in the room to stay fixed on Trump as he struggled to regain his footing. Reporters scribbled frantically, others abandoning. Notebooks entirely to type directly into laptops balanced precariously on their knees. One reporter whispered under her breath, "This is the moment, this is the clip," and she was absolutely right. From the far left, Representative Wallace, a typically soft-spoken lawmaker from Oregon, called out, "Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The witness hasn't addressed the question. The question concerned disclosure to national security officials. That's the record. That's the only thing that matters right now." The chairman's gavel crashed down. "The president will answer the question." Trump waved both hands frantically, like a man swatting away smoke. "There is no question. There is no daughter. This is complete garbage." His tone had shifted from anger to something approaching desperation, and everyone could hear the change. Crockett's eyes narrowed with surgical precision. "So, Mr. President, your testimony here under oath is that the documents presented hold no validity? That the DNA connection is completely fabricated?" Trump froze. The word DNA had landed with unexpected weight. The camera zoomed closer, catching that flicker of hesitation across his face, a pause lasting less than a second, but on live television, it stretched into eternity. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Members of the public who'd secured seats leaned toward each other, whispering frantically. One man pulled out his phone, recording everything from his vantage point, knowing it might become invaluable within minutes. At the back, a staffer for a cable network mouthed to her colleague, "We need to roll this live." Crockett spoke again, her tone so controlled it was cutting. "I'll remind you again, Mr. President. Lying under oath carries its own consequences. If you want the cameras off, you'd need to explain to the American people why transparency stops at your doorstep." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Republicans on the panel shifted uncomfortably, some folding their arms defensively, others glaring at Crockett as if their stares could silence her. But Trump wasn't glaring at them. He was glaring at the cameras, looking like a man trying to stare them into submission, only to realize they were completely immune to his intimidation. The chairman attempted to cool the temperature. "Representative Crockett, perhaps we should proceed carefully." But Crockett cut in smoothly, her words perfectly measured. "Carefully is exactly what I'm doing, Mr. Chairman. We owe the public truth, nothing less." She reached down to a thick folder on her desk and tapped it once, sharply with her fingernail. The sound carried into the microphone, echoing across the room. It wasn't just a folder anymore. It had become a loaded weapon. The room tensed. Cameras zoomed in on the folder. Reporters whispered urgently, and Trump blinked hard. For decades, he had dominated rooms with bravado and bluster. But in this moment, with Crockett steady and the nation watching, the power had shifted decisively. This was no longer his room. A cable news producer watching from Los Angeles shouted into her headset, "Keep it live. Don't cut to commercial. This is gold." Simultaneously, in living rooms across America, ordinary people stared at their screens in disbelief. A retired school teacher in Ohio muttered to her husband, "He looks scared." A truck driver on break in Kansas City texted his brother, "Are you watching this? He's losing it." Every reaction outside those marble walls was being shaped by the silence inside. Tension thick as fog, stakes higher than they'd ever climbed. Crockett wasn't just questioning Trump. She was cornering him. Lived before millions of witnesses. But Crockett hadn't revealed the biggest detail yet, and the longer she waited, the more Trump's composure began to crack. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice, and she didn't rush. She reached for the folder before her with the casual deliberation of someone reaching for a glass of water. Calm, methodical, without a hint of nervousness. The sound of the metal clasp snapping open carried through the microphone, making the entire chamber lean forward collectively. "I'd like to enter into the record," she began. A set of sealed documents originating from federal archives. Documents indicating a potential DNA match between the President of the United States and a young woman whose existence has never been disclosed to this body or the American people. The words struck like thunder. Reporters fumbled with keyboards. Members of Congress shifted in their seats, suddenly alert. The gallery erupted in whispers, until the chairman's gavel demanded order. Trump leaned forward, his face crimson. "That's classified material, sealed for good reason. You can't just wave papers around and pretend they mean something." Crockett looked directly at him, unflinching. "Mr. President, sealed doesn't mean imaginary. These aren't rumors. They're signed, authenticated, and verified through official channels. I ask you again, were national security officials ever informed of this possible connection?" Trump's hands twitched against the desk. "This is a smear, a disgusting personal smear. I won't dignify it with an answer." She didn't let him escape. "With all due respect, sir, your refusal to answer is an answer. And it raises an even larger question. If this information was hidden, who was it hidden from, and why?" The chairman tried again to interject, but the momentum had shifted irrevocably. This wasn't his hearing anymore. This was Crockett's stage, and she knew exactly how to command it. From behind her, a colleague leaned forward and whispered, "Are you sure about this?" She didn't even turn her head. "Positive." Trump slammed his hand down. "This is a witch hunt, that's all this is. Witch hunt after witch hunt, you people are sick." His words echoed through the chamber, but instead of silencing the moment, they fueled it. Crockett placed one of the documents flat on the table. She didn't read from it yet. She simply let it sit there, visible to every camera. "This file," she said slowly, "details not just the existence of a DNA link, but the potential implications for security clearance, conflicts of interest, and undisclosed personal ties. That is why we're here, Mr. President. This isn't about gossip, it's about national security." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Even some Republican members seemed uneasy, shifting in their seats as if wondering how far this could escalate. Trump shook his head violently. No, I won't stand for this. I want the cameras off. Do you hear me? Off. This is not for television. Shut them down." But naturally, the cameras didn't shut down. They zoomed in closer. Millions of Americans watched the President of the United States beg for secrecy, while Crockett calmly laid evidence before him. She turned her gaze back to him. "Mr. President, transparency is not optional. Every American watching this deserves..." to know whether their leader has hidden ties that could compromise his judgment. For the first time, Trump hesitated. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. His eyes darted to the folder. He swallowed hard. A reporter in the back whispered into her recorder, "He's cracking. This is it." At that moment, Crockett slid the OI top sheet slightly forward so the camera could catch the official seals and dates printed across the page. She didn't need to read what was on it. Just the sight of government markings was enough to make the image stick. Screenshots of that paper would circulate online before the hearing even ended. Trump's voice grew sharper, almost pleading. "You don't know what you're doing. You're putting the country at risk. This is sabotage." But Crockett shook, her head slowly. "The only risk, Mr. President, is allowing secrets to sit in shadows while you ask the American people to trust you. Secrets like this don't stay hidden forever. The truth has a way of finding light." Silence followed. Not the kind of silence that meant boredom, but the kind that meant people were hanging on every second, waiting for what came next. In households across America, families exchanged stunned looks. A teenager in Arizona whispered to his mother, "Did she just say he has a daughter?" An older couple in Wisconsin sat forward on their couch, the husband muttering, "He's sweating. Look at him. He's sweating." The shock wasn't only in what Crockett revealed, it was in how she revealed it. Calm, controlled, surgical, and for Trump, every second that ticked by was another second he couldn't control. But Crockett wasn't finished, because the next revelation would strike harder than anything she had said so far. The chairman's gavel hammered again, but the sound barely registered above the tension filling the chamber. Everyone knew what was happening. The balance of power was shifting, and it wasn't in the president's favor. Jasmine Crockett sat poised, her folder open, while Trump leaned forward like a cornered fighter trying to bluster his way out of defeat. "This is a disgrace," Trump shouted, jabbing his finger toward the cameras. "We are not going to keep broadcasting lies to the American people. Shut it down. I'm telling you, shut it down right now." The cameras, of course, didn't move. If anything, the red light seemed to burn brighter, recording every second of his unraveling. Crockett waited until his voice trailed off, then leaned toward her microphone. Her voice was steady, almost too steady. "Mr. President, your reaction speaks louder than anything I could say. If these documents were baseless, you would deny them plainly and proceed. But you're asking the American people to look away instead of answering." Her words cut straight through the chamber. Across the room, Representative Clancy from Ohio, a staunch Trump ally, slammed his hand on the table. "This is a circus. She's out of line, Mr. Chairman. She's grandstanding for the cameras." Crockett turned her head slightly, addressing him without losing her composure. "With respect, Congressman, the cameras aren't here for me. They're here because the American people have a right to know if their president is hiding crucial information. I don't fear these lights. Clearly someone else does." The gallery erupted in hushed gasps. Trump's face tightened, his lips curling, as he shot back, "That's enough, enough. Do you know who you're talking to? I'm the president. I decide what's enough." But Crockett didn't flinch. She opened the folder further, sliding another document across the table so the cameras could see the header. Office of Federal Archives, sealed record. She tapped the page once with her fingernail, sharply. The sound carried into the microphone, echoing across the room. "The record exists, Mr. President. And records don't care about titles or power, they simply exist." Trump pushed back his chair so hard it screeched against the floor. "You don't understand. This is dangerous. You're putting a family at risk. You're putting this country at risk." His voice cracked on the word family, and every microphone in the room caught it. Crockett leaned forward, seizing the opening. "Which family, sir?" The room froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. For the first time, Trump didn't speak. Immediately, his mouth opened, then shut. He glanced down at the desk, his eyes darting side to side. That silence, those few seconds, were louder than anything he could have said. One reporter whispered loudly enough for the row behind him to hear. "He doesn't know what to say." The chairman called for order again, but the chamber was past the point of order. The clash was no longer about procedure. It was about control, and everyone could see who held it. Crockett sat back in her chair, her voice calm. The American, people can see what's happening. You want the cameras off because you know once the truth comes out, you can't take it back. You can't bury it again. Trump leaned forward, his face flushed, his hand gripping the microphone as if he could squeeze it into silence. If you think you can intimidate me, you're wrong. This is fake. Fake, just like everything else, and anyone who believes this is a fool. But his tone betrayed him. It wasn't the swagger of confidence. It was the tone of a man scrambling to keep the floor from falling out beneath him. In homes across the country, people sat forward on couches and leaned over bar counters, transfixed. A college student in Nevada live-streamed the hearing on her phone, whispering, "Oh my God, he's losing it." In a diner in Tulsa, a group of late-shift workers gathered around the TV, one muttering, "He sounds scared. He's never sounded scared before." Crockett picked up her pen, twirling it between her fingers, then set it down carefully. This committee isn't here to intimidate. It's here to ask questions. And the only person who seems intimidated by those questions is you. The silence afterward was electric. Even the Republican members who wanted to object hesitated. Interrupting her now might only make it worse for their president. And that's when Trump made his fatal mistake. He stood, his chair screeching again, and pointed at the cameras. "Turn them off. Do you hear me? Turn them off." The plea echoed across the chamber, and within seconds, clips of that outburst were already bouncing around the internet. But Crockett hadn't even revealed the central detail yet. The mention of the daughter was still waiting, and it would make this clash look like a warm-up. For a few long seconds after Trump's outburst, the room vibrated with tension. The chairman's gavel cracked again and again, but it was useless. The chamber wasn't listening to him anymore. It was locked on the standoff between the President of the United States and Representative Jasmine Crockett. Crockett didn't rush. She didn't speak over him. She let the echo of his demand, "Turn them off," settle into the walls like smoke. And when it was clear he had nothing left but sputtering outrage, she leaned into her microphone. "Mr. President," she said softly, her voice lower than before, forcing everyone to lean in. "These records don't just point to a DNA match. They point to a young woman, a woman who, if these files are accurate, is your daughter." Gasps cut through the chamber. This time they weren't just from the gallery, they came from lawmakers themselves. A Republican from Texas muttered, "Oh, my God," before clapping his hand over his mouth. Trump's face went crimson. He slammed both palms on the desk and barked, "Lies! Absolute lies! I have no secret daughter, none! You should be ashamed of yourself." But Crockett didn't back down. She opened the folder wider, pulling out another sheet of paper and holding it up for the cameras to catch the government letterhead. She didn't read the name yet. She only showed enough to prove it was real. "This document," she continued, "was sealed nearly 2 decades ago. It suggests not only paternity, but a financial arrangement meant to ensure this young woman remained outside of public knowledge. That raises questions far beyond family matters. It raises questions of influence, leverage, and risk." The words influence and leverage landed like punches. Reporters typed frantically, their faces lit by laptop screens. Every second Crockett spoke was another headline being born. Trump pointed again at the cameras. Cut them now. This is personal, this is private, this is not for television." His voice cracked hard on the word private, and Americans at home heard it loud and clear. Crockett seized the moment. "Mr. President, you are not a private citizen. You are the commander-in-chief. When you conceal a child, you are not just hiding from the public. You are creating a vulnerability that foreign adversaries could exploit. That is why this matters. That is why this committee has a duty to ask these questions." The room buzzed with whispers. On the Republican side, some members covered their microphones with their hands, whispering frantically to aides. On the Democratic side, members exchanged wide-eyed glances, realizing they were watching a once-in-a-generation moment play out live. In the gallery, a young man in a blue hoodie whispered, "She really said it, she really went there." Trump shook his head violently, his hair shifting with the motion. "No, no, 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 you don't get to do this. I've given everything to this country, and you smear me with garbage. This is a disgrace." Crockett kept her tone measured as if she were cross-examining a witness in court. "Then say it plainly, under oath. Do you deny ever fathering a child who has not been publicly acknowledged?" Trump froze. His mouth opened, but the words didn't come fast enough. The cameras caught the hesitation, and that single pause told its own story. A reporter whispered, "That's it. That's the clip." Crockett leaned back slightly. She didn't need to press harder. She knew the silence was doing the work for her. On social media, the reactions exploded in real time. Hashtags sprang to life. "And secret daughter," and "Crockett vs. Trump," and "cut the cameras." Millions of viewers clipped the feed and shared it within seconds, some with disbelief, some with outrage, some with pure fascination. In a bar in Toledo, the bartender muted the jukebox and turned up the TV volume. "Listen to her," he said. "She's not even raising her voice. She's just holding him there." Back in the chamber, Trump finally barked out a denial. "No, there is no daughter. This is fake, completely fake." His words spilled out too fast, almost tripping over each other like a man trying to plug holes in a sinking boat. But Crockett didn't let him steer the moment. She turned to the chairman. "For the record, I am submitting these files as exhibits. The American people deserve transparency." The chairman, visibly shaken, nodded stiffly. "So ordered." Crockett folded her hands, her gaze fixed on Trump. "You can call it fake. You can scream into these cameras. But the truth, Mr. President, doesn't go away because you say so." The silence that followed was thicker than any gavel bang could break. In that silence, millions of Americans made up their minds about what they had just witnessed. But Crockett knew this was only the spark. The real fire was about to ignite in the chamber's fallout. The silence inside that chamber wasn't peace. It was pressure, a weight bearing down on everyone as if the marble walls themselves were holding their breath. Jasmine Crockett sat composed, the folder still open in front of her, while Donald Trump gripped the microphone as though he could bend it into submission. Then, like a dam breaking, the room fractured into voices. Republican lawmakers erupted. Representative Clancy shot up from his chair, shouting across the room, "This is a hit job. This entire hearing is a disgrace to the institution of Congress." His voice cracked under the strain, and aides scrambled behind him, whispering in his ear. From the Democratic side, murmurs swelled. One representative leaned toward another and whispered, "She actually said it, she went straight for it." Another responded, "And he didn't deny it fast enough." The chairman banged the gavel repeatedly, his face pale. "Order! The chamber will come to order." But it was useless, the chamber wasn't his anymore. Trump raised his voice again, drowning out the noise. "This is nothing but a sham. This is an attack on me, an attack on my family, and an attack on this country. You're putting the United States at risk with this circus." His words boomed, but they didn't settle anyone. They only stirred more chaos. Members on both sides barked, back some demanding he answer, others calling for Crockett to be silenced. And through it all, Crockett didn't move. She stayed perfectly still, her eyes locked on Trump, her hands folded over the papers like a lawyer guarding her strongest evidence. Her silence screamed louder than the shouting. Finally, she leaned forward and spoke softly into her microphone, her voice cutting through the chamber like a scalpel. "If this were false, Mr. President, you would have dismissed it cleanly. But instead, you're demanding cameras be cut and calling it an attack. That's not the behavior of an innocent man. That's the behavior of someone with something to lose." The words landed hard. Trump's face contorted, red creeping into his cheeks. "Lies, that's all you have? Lies and fabrications. I don't have time for this garbage. The American people don't have time for this garbage." Crockett raised one eyebrow, slightly, the smallest gesture of disbelief. Mr. President, with respect, the American people are watching this more closely than anything else you've done this year. That line hit harder than a gavel. The cameras zoomed tighter on Trump. The microphones picked up every breath, every stumble. Reporters at the back exchanged frantic glances, realizing they were capturing a president in real time losing his grip on the narrative. Representative Wallace from Oregon leaned toward his microphone. Point of clarification, Representative. Crockett is not making a personal attack. She is asking a question that goes directly to matters of national security. The president's response, or lack of response, is the issue here. Trump wheeled on him. You're all in on it. Every one of fee. You think you can trap me with fake papers, with garbage? It won't work. The people see right through this, but outside that chamber, the people weren't seeing through it. They were seeing into it. Across living rooms, phones, and bars, viewers caught the president's flailing anger against Crockett's calm precision, and the contrast spoke louder than any speech. In Philadelphia, a single mother watching the broadcast whispered to her teenage son, "She's not even raising her voice. Look at him, he's losing it." In a small town in Iowa, a farmer shook his head at the television in his kitchen. You can tell when a man's rattled, he's rattled. The fallout inside the chamber was immediate, but the fallout outside was volcanic. Social media timelines filled with split-screen images, Crockett calm on one side, Trump furious on the other. Memes, hashtags, and raw clips flooded feeds. The phrase, "secret daughter," became the two words nobody could avoid. Back in the hearing room, the chairman, desperate to regain control, barked, "Representative Crockett, you will proceed carefully. Mr. President, you will answer questions directly." But neither listened. Crockett leaned into her microphone again. "Mr. President, the longer you shout, the louder the truth becomes. If you want to deny this, deny it under oath, plainly, clearly, and without hesitation." The gallery broke into low gasps. Everyone knew that challenge was the sharpest blade yet. Trump stared back at her, his chest heaving, his lips pressed into a line. He didn't answer, not right away. The pause was deadly. One of the Republican members leaned into his microphone, almost frantic. "Mr. President, just say it. Just say no." But the cameras caught it. The hesitation, the flicker of calculation across his face. And Jasmine Crockett, never breaking eye contact, sat silently, letting his silence tell its own story. But outside that chamber, the story was already exploding. News anchors, social media users, and everyday Americans were reacting in real time, and their reactions would shape what came next. While the chamber swirled with shouting and gavel strikes, the rest of America was wide awake. The hearing was being broadcast on every major network, and what had begun as a late-night formality had transformed into the kind of moment that pulled strangers together around screens. In Los Angeles, inside a newsroom, producers scrambled with headsets on, yelling into microphones, "Why, stay live, do not cut away. Replay Crockett's line about the daughter as soon as there's a break." On the monitors, Trump's red face filled the frame, frozen mid-shout. Staffers clipped the footage, already drafting graphics. President denies secret daughter claim in stunning. Exchange. In Phoenix, a group of college students crowded into a dorm common room, their textbooks pushed aside. "Did she just say he has a daughter?" one asked, eyes wide. Another replied, "Yeah," and he didn't answer, he froze. "You saw it." The group fell silent, staring at the television as though history had walked straight into their living space. Meanwhile, in a bar in Pittsburgh, the volume on the jukebox went down and the TV volume went up. Patrons gathered in knots, leaning on stools and tables. "Look at him," one construction worker muttered, shaking his head. "He's begging them to turn the cameras off. He's never done that before." His buddy answered, "That's fear, man. You can't fake that." Across the country, social media boiled. Clips spread faster than networks could broadcast them. On TikTok, someone posted the 47-second exchange with the caption, "The moment Trump begged for the cameras off." Within minutes, it racked up hundreds of thousands of views. On Twitter, hashtags surged. "Where secret daughter," "Where Crockett strikes," "We're cut," the cameras, and in living rooms, families argued, cried, or just sat stunned. In a small house outside Tulsa, a retired Navy veteran pointed at the screen and said to his wife, "He's compromised. If it's true, if there's a daughter and he didn't disclose it, that's a hole big enough for any foreign power to drive through." In Detroit, a mother held her phone in one hand and her daughter's homework in the other, muttering, "She's brave." Crockett's brave. Nobody else has ever gotten him this cornered. Even in rural Montana, where spotty internet barely kept the live stream stable, a family sat around their kitchen table watching the grainy feed buffer unload. "I've never seen him sweat like this," the father said, his voice low. The contrast was unavoidable. Crockett's calm, surgical questioning against Trump's frantic demands. America wasn't just watching, it was judging. And the verdict, at least in that moment, was leaning against the president. Back in New York's Times Square, a giant digital billboard flashed the live broadcast across the crowd of tourists. People stopped in their tracks, some lifting their phones to record, narrating their disbelief. "You guys, Trump's literally begging them to cut the cameras." This is crazy. Cable anchors cut into programming, each network spinning the moment in real time. One conservative commentator tried to downplay it. "This is nothing more than a personal smear tactic. It doesn't mean anything." But his co-host interrupted sharply. "Then why is he panicking? Why is he asking to cut the broadcast if it's baseless?" In another newsroom in Atlanta, an anchor leaned forward, hands pressed against the desk. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching history. Representative Crockett has forced the President of the United States into a position where he is visibly shaken. We cannot yet confirm the accuracy of the sealed documents, but what we can confirm is the President's reaction, and that alone is telling." The American public wasn't united in reaction, far from it. Some were furious, calling it a smear. Others, exhilarated, calling it justice. And many simply stunned, not knowing what to believe. But one thing was undeniable. People were talking. Conversations spread like wildfire through text messages, group chats, and phone calls to friends and family. "Turn on the news, you won't believe what just happened. She said he has a secret daughter." The words bounced from screen to screen, state to state, until even those who hadn't been watching tuned in. And for Jasmine Crockett, the power of the moment wasn't just in what she said, it was in how far her words traveled. She hadn't just cornered Trump in the chamber. She had placed the entire nation in the same seat as the committee, watching him squirm under the weight of questions. He refused to answer. By the end of the hour, millions of Americans had already formed their own conclusions. Some believed her, some believed him, but nearly everyone agreed on one point. Something had cracked, and nothing about the presidency felt the same anymore. But while the nation watched and reacted, Trump himself was unraveling even further inside the chamber. Unable to wrestle back control of the moment, the hearing room was no longer a hearing room. It was a stage, and the President of the United States was losing his performance. The cameras stayed locked on him, their little red lights merciless, capturing every twitch, every beat of sweat, every frantic glance. Trump slammed his hand on the table again, his voice rising. "This is a disgrace. This is illegal. I want those cameras off now. Do you hear me? Cut them off." His demand echoed through the chamber, bouncing off marble and microphones. But the cameras didn't move. They just kept rolling. Jasmine Crockett tilted her head slightly, her face composed as though she were listening to a child throwing a tantrum. She leaned into her microphone, speaking slowly, deliberately. "Mr. President, every second you demand secrecy, you only prove why this conversation belongs in the open. The American people don't trust closed doors. They trust the truth. Words landed like a gavel strike. Trump jabbed a finger at her. "You're trying to humiliate me. That's what this is. You're trying to tear me down in front of the world." Crockett shook her head gently. "No, Mr. President, you're doing that to yourself." Gasps rippled across the chamber. Reporters looked up from their laptops, startled by the bluntness of her words. Trump's face darkened. You think you can talk to me like that? I'm the President of the United States. I built everything, I've beaten everyone. And you, some nobody from Texas, you think you can corner me? Crockett's eyes didn't leave him. I don't need to corner you. You walked yourself here. All I did was show the public what you tried to hide. The clash didn't feel like politician versus politician anymore. It felt personal, raw, stripped of pretense. In the back, a reporter whispered to his colleague, "He's unraveling." This is the moment. Trump's voice grew louder, sharper, his words tumbling over one another. Fake papers, fake story, fake everything. I've never seen her. I don't know her. I don't have a daughter. This is an ambush, total ambush. But instead of looking strong, his rant looked chaotic. His face flushed, his hand trembled slightly as he pointed toward the cameras, and across the country, millions of people watched, mesmerized by the spectacle of a man who had built his image. On strength and dominance, now begging for escape. Crockett tapped the folder softly once. The sound was small, but the microphones caught it. If it's fake, then why the fear, Mr. President? Why the panic? An innocent man wouldn't need the cameras off. An innocent man would welcome the light. Trump barked back instantly. Because this isn't politics anymore. This is my family. This is my life. You're trying to destroy. And there it was again. The word family. It slipped out raw, instinctive. The gallery reacted with audible gasps. Some scribbled notes furiously. Others simply stared wide-eyed. Crockett seized it like a lawyer catching a slip. Her tone sharpened. Your family? Then you admit there is something here? Trump stammered, words tripping over themselves. No, that's not what I said. Don't twist my words. Don't you twist my words. But it was too late. The cameras had already captured the stumble, the hesitation, the crack. Across America, viewers reacted instantly. In a living room in Tampa, a grandmother clasped her hand over her mouth. He said family, she whispered. In a diner in Oklahoma, a waitress refilled coffee while staring at the screen. He's falling apart, she said softly. Back in the chamber, Trump gripped the microphone like a lifeline, his voice pleading now more than commanding. Please cut the cameras. This doesn't belong here. This doesn't belong to the public. End it. His words echoed, heavy with something few had ever seen in him. Desperation. Crockett didn't blink. Mr. President, nothing belongs to you alone when you sit in that office. You swore an oath to the American people, and oaths don't come with escape clauses. The silence afterward was suffocating. Even Trump's allies looked uneasy, shifting in their seats, whispering among themselves. For once, none of them jumped in to rescue him. And outside, in newsrooms and living rooms, anchors and citizens alike repeated the same line. He begged them to stop. The soundbite would become the defining moment of the night, replayed endlessly, dissected on panels, clipped into every feed. But inside the chamber, Crockett hadn't delivered her final blow yet. She had revealed the documents. She had mentioned the daughter. She had cornered the president into desperation. And now the stage was set for the most defining moment of her career. But Crockett wasn't interested in personal victory. Her next move would turn this into something much larger than Trump, something about truth itself. The hearing room was still thick with Trump's frantic pleas, his voice echoing in everyone's ears. But then, in a single pivot, Jasmine Crockett shifted the weight of the moment away from him. She leaned forward, her microphone catching every syllable, her tone calm, controlled, deliberate. This is not about humiliating one man. This is about whether the highest office in our country can be trusted. The question is not just about a daughter. The question is about honesty, about whether secrecy has compromised the president's ability to lead without leverage or threat hanging over him. The words landed like stones in water, rippling across every corner of the chamber. Reporters sat straighter, fingers flying across keyboards. Even members who had been shouting moments earlier grew quiet. Trump gripped his microphone again. That's not true. None of it's true. This is a smear. Crockett turned to face him fully, not blinking. If it were a smear, you would have denied it plainly. Instead, you've begged to shut the cameras off. Instead, you've admitted twice that this is about family. Those aren't the words of a man with nothing to hide. The gallery gasped. Even the chairman, who had spent most of the hearing trying to maintain order, looked visibly shaken. Crockett didn't stop there. She opened her folder once more, holding up another page without reading from it. This is not gossip. This is an official record. Whether you want to admit it or not, this document exists, and every second you avoid answering, it becomes less about me and more about you. Trump raised his voice again, but it was different now. Less thunder, more pleading. You're twisting everything. You don't know what you're doing. You're putting this country in danger. Crockett leaned in, her words cutting through his. The only danger, Mr. President, is in secrets that can be used against you. If foreign governments know what you're hiding, then they have leverage over you that even this Congress does not. That's not just personal. That's national security. For the first time all night, Trump didn't shout back. He sat still, breathing heavily, his eyes darting to the papers on the table. The silence said everything. Crockett turned away from him. Then, addressing the chamber itself, this is bigger than Donald Trump. This is about every future president, about whether we allow personal secrets to put this country at risk. If we don't demand transparency now, then we send a message that it's acceptable for those in power to keep the truth hidden, no matter the cost. The line resonated. Reporters scrambled to type it verbatim. On screens across the nation, anchors paused, repeating her words. This is bigger than Donald Trump. In homes across the country, people nodded quietly. A middle-aged man in Ohio whispered to his wife, "She's right. If he can hide something this big, what else can any of them hide?" Crockett wasn't grandstanding. Her voice didn't rise, and her gestures were minimal, but the steadiness, the sense of conviction was undeniable. She was no longer interrogating Trump. She was speaking to the nation. Every young person watching this tonight should remember one thing, she said, her tone shifting from sharp to steady. The truth has weight. It can be delayed, it can be buried, but it cannot be erased. The truth will always find light, and when it does, it will expose those who fear it most. Trump fidgeted, muttering into his microphone, but his words were drowned out by the sound of her voice carrying across the chamber. The gallery was silent. No whispers, no gasps, no movement. Just silence, the kind of silence that follows when everyone knows they've witnessed something that will be remembered. On social media, the clip spread instantly. This is bigger than Donald Trump trended within minutes. People posted side-by-side images. Crockett steady and calm, Trump flushed and frantic. One post read, "History books will show this screenshot." Even commentators who rarely agreed found themselves aligned. On one network, a conservative host admitted, "She cornered him and he cracked. Whether you agree with her or not, she won the moment." And in that instant, Crockett cemented something far greater than a viral clip. She had defined herself as more than a freshman representative. She had become the face of accountability, the person who spoke plainly when others danced around the truth. She looked back at Trump one last time, her voice quiet but cutting. This isn't about you anymore, Mr. President. This is about the truth. And the truth doesn't beg for cameras to be cut. The silence that followed wasn't just silence, it was recognition. Everyone in that chamber, and everyone watching at home, knew she had turned the tide. But history isn't just made in a moment. It's made in what happens after. And the aftermath of this clash would shake the country long after the cameras stopped rolling. The gavel finally came down with enough force to rattle the desk, but by then, control of the hearing was long gone. The broadcast had already taken on a life of its own, spilling into living rooms, phones, and conversations across the country. The chamber might have eventually quieted, but the storm outside was just beginning. Within minutes, news anchors across networks replayed the now infamous clip of Trump pleading, "Cut the cameras, turn them off." Side by side, they showed Jasmine Crockett's calm stare, her words echoing like a verdict. The truth doesn't beg for cameras to be cut. In Boston, a group of nurses gathered around a break-room television, whispering to each other in disbelief. One said, "I've never seen him like that. He looks scared." Another shook her head. It wasn't just him. She looked like she'd been waiting her whole life to say that. In Dallas, a father scrolled through his phone at the dinner table while his teenage son asked, "So is it true? Does he really have a daughter?" The father didn't answer right away. He just sighed. "What matters, son, is that he couldn't answer." At a gas station in Indiana, the cashier and a customer stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes glued to a tiny TV mounted above the counter. "She broke him," the cashier whispered. "I never thought I'd see that." The reactions weren't uniform. Supporters defended Trump online, claiming the documents were forged, that the entire thing was a setup. But even those defenses couldn't erase the images burned into the public's mind. A president panicking under the glare of cameras, and a young representative holding steady, unshaken. In Washington, pundits scrambled to frame the night. On one network, a panelist said, "This was a political ambush, plain and simple. Representative Crockett crossed the line." Another shot back, "No, Trump crossed the line years ago. She just exposed what happens when secrets catch up to you." The hearing ended hours later, but by then, nobody cared about the official record. The only thing people remembered was those 47 seconds of desperation and the sentences Crockett etched into history. By morning, newspapers carried headlines that read, "Crockett confronts Trump over secret daughter," and "President begs to cut cameras in stunning exchange." Editorials debated what it meant for national security, for the presidency, for the future of politics. But beyond the analysis, one truth was clear. Jasmine Crockett had shifted the conversation, and she had done it without raising her voice. Her words carried into classrooms, workplaces, and homes. Teachers used the clip as a lesson in civics, showing students how accountability should look. Pastors spoke of it from pulpits, drawing parallels to biblical warnings about truth and secrets. Families debated it over breakfast, each interpreting what it meant for the country. And through it all, one lesson rose above the noise. Power built on secrecy is fragile. It only takes one moment of exposure to bring it crashing down. Crockett's performance wasn't perfect strategy. It was conviction. She didn't scream. She didn't trade insults. She stood on truth, and truth alone. That was why her words resonated. That was why Americans, regardless of politics, felt the weight of what she had done. For Trump, the clip became the scar he couldn't cover. His demand to cut the cameras was replayed endlessly, dissected by psychologists, mocked in memes, debated. In town halls, people asked not just if he had a daughter, but what else he might be hiding, what else might surface when pressure was applied. For Crockett, it was the defining moment of her career. Overnight, she was no longer just a rising member of Congress. She was a symbol of accountability, the person who stared down the president on live television and didn't blink. And for the American people, the night was a reminder. Leaders are not untouchable. Titles don't shield you from truth. When you sit in that office, your secrets are not yours alone. They belong to the nation you swore to serve. As the dust settled, the clip continued to roll, shared again and again. Some people watched in anger, others in awe, but all of them remembered it. The moment was unforgettable, not because of scandal alone, but because of what it revealed about power, fear, and honesty. In the end, it wasn't about Crockett or Trump. It was about the truth and the lesson that the truth, no matter how buried, will always fight its way to the surface. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the truth has patience. It waits, it watches, and when it arrives, it doesn't need permission. So the next time you see a leader trying to cut the cameras, remember this moment. Remember that silence, fear, and avoidance always tell a story of their own. Because secrets can be hidden for a time, but the truth always outlives them. If you want more stories that shine a light on truth, accountability, and the moments that change history, don't forget to subscribe.